The church exists to serve the poor, not to solve their problems. And there's a big difference between the two. Serving the poor means that we treat them with dignity and with respect, care, and compassion. It's not our jobs to get them out of poverty. It's our jobs to assist them so that they can have the dignity that they deserve as a Christian. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. Happy New Year to all of you, and please excuse this kind of less than normal standard experience of the Father Leo Show. I'm coming to you from the Philippines, but in a very unique place of the Philippines, a very poor part of the Philippines. And guess what? That's going to be the topic of our show today. Poverty, what it really means, and all its implications. So let's jump right into it with a little conversation about faith and the poor. You see, I first of all want to thank all of the people who supported us with Patreon on 2023. You know, we just started the show and we're kind of hoping to build up this experience for people because they're looking for an authentic and a unique voice. And let me tell you, this is as authentic as it's going to get. You can hear that my voice is kind of hoarse because it is so hot right now. There isn't air conditioning in this place, and it's, close to 100 degrees here with high humidity. And I've been out in the sun doing some mission work and kind of exploring the area, and also doing a lot of preaching and talking to people, thankfully, through a translator. And, when I started this show, I wanted to have an authentic, unique, contributing voice to the whole Catholic world, because to be honest with you, what I hear is good stuff, but a lot of it seems to be what you would normally hear, especially, just religious kind of themes. But how does it connect to culture, but in a more lived and unique way? You see, growing up in America, I never lost my sense of being Filipino. I was never necessarily proud of it, simply because I didn't quite understand it. I wasn't ashamed of it, and I wasn't embarrassed of it, but I certainly didn't celebrate it. And coming to the Philippines, you kind of get a unique perspective. And one of the ways that I characterize the Filipinos is that they really are beatitudinal, particularly the beatitude that talks about poor in spirit. In Matthew's gospel, we hear very specifically in chapter 5, blessed are the poor in spirit, they will inherit the kingdom of God. They will inherit God's blessings because Jesus himself grew up poor. And by the way, when I talk about an authentic experience, you're probably going to hear a lot in the background of horns honking, perhaps, because there are tricycles that drive up and down this road. There are no quiet areas where I can have studio quality recording. But again, that's what it's like in poor parts of the world. And while the people here, particularly in the town where I'm from, which is Catangan Masbate, which is a little bit central, it's definitely south of Luzon, where the big city of Manila is. It's kind of like the biggest island next to Mindanao, which is in the south. So as far as the geography is concerned, the Philippines is made up of about 17,000 islands, I understand. It's archipelagic for sure. And so that contributes to its poverty because there's not like one easy way to coalesce the people together. And so to create infrastructure from island to island, that's pretty tough. And in my part of the Philippines where I was born and where I was baptized, it's particularly poor. I mean, they've only had electricity, albeit irregularly, for the past, 10 years. And running water is definitely by pump. It's not like they have heat to create hot water. So, I've been taking showers and baths with a big bucket and just kind of pouring it over my head. And yes, that water is cold. But you know what? In the heat of the sun, it actually is fine, and it definitely wakes you up to one very important thing. For me, I'm speaking for myself. It's easy for me to become spoiled as a priest. You know, in America, we priests, we live pretty well. Now, I'm different from a lot of priests in that, there are types of priests that vow poverty. I'm one of them because I belong to a consecrated life called Voluntas Dei. It's a community of consecrated life. But I'm also different from them. So let me just kind of break it down for you so that you can understand the poor of spirit that Jesus is asking of me as a priest, but also to you as God's priestly people. So in the clergy world, you have diocesan priests. They do not vow poverty, and nor should they, because they have the responsibility to live as, in a sense, CEOs of parishes. They have to understand finances. They are administrators. It's not their charism, but in a way, it's kind of what they have to do. And they also have to, contribute to their own retirement. And so they also have expenses. So their life is to live, in a sense, as professionals. On the other side, you have consecrated religious. They vow poverty because they have nothing to buy. Their housing is always covered for them. All of their meals will always be supplied to them by their superior. They don't need to own a car because if they need one, one will be provided to them. Now that's true in America. Now in other parts of the world where, it's not as wealthy, it might be a different story. The poverty that they experience in a developing world is really, really poor. Now I'm different as a priest. I'm different in many ways as a priest, but while I have the work to live as a secular person, I have the consecration and therefore the vows of a religious, which means I actually have to vow poverty. But because I'm a secular, consecrated priest, I have to work. If I don't work, I don't eat. I don't eat. Because if I can't pay for my food, then I don't eat. So my job is to work. What I do with my work is I obviously create content, hopefully enrich and nourish people's faiths. But I also have a staff. And my staff, I have to actually pay them. And that includes the food truck staff, the production team, just everyone involved in the organization. But when I say that it's easy for me to be spoiled, it's easy for anyone in America to be spoiled. And so we have to take very seriously what Jesus says about poverty. He himself was born in the humblest and even the poverty conditions of a stable in Bethlehem. He grew up in Nazareth and in Cana of Galilee, which was a simple fishing village. His mother, Mary, and Joseph were from Nazareth. It was one of these backwater towns. No one cared about it. And so for him to come from Nazareth, people will always ask, is there anything good that comes from Nazareth? Is there anything good that comes from Galilee? Because these are poor areas. Jesus's mission was to the poor. And Jesus did not want to create social structures, basically a social security system in a church. No. He wanted to create a church that cared for the poor, knowing that no one can solve every poor person's problem. It's impossible because of the roots of poverty, which we want to kind of talk about in this next section for culture. But right now, I can simply say this. The church exists to serve the poor, not to solve their problems. And there's a big difference between the two. Serving the poor means that we treat them with dignity and with respect, care, and compassion. It's not our jobs to get them out of poverty. It's our jobs to assist them so that they can have the dignity that they deserve as a Christian. And guess what? Here in the Philippines, I can tell you this. I meet a lot of poor people, but they have the dignity of being a Christian. They come to church well dressed, even if they are poor. They have the dignity of being Christians, that even though they live in literal huts that can get blown away very simply. They have a picture and a side altar with Jesus and the saints, a crucifix, and that's where they pray and they get hope and inspiration. You see, just because you're poor doesn't mean you don't have dignity. And that's the issue that we have when we talk about poverty in terms of culture. What I want to do in this first segment is just to remind people that the church exists to serve the poor, to let them know that they are God's beloved children. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, why doesn't the Vatican just simply sell everything and you can give it all to the poor? And that's really one of the most unthoughtful, uncognitive, I don't even know how to say it. I'm just going to say it. It's one of the stupidest things I hear as a priest, because it's rooted in ignorance and in selfishness. Because they honestly think that those big, beautiful buildings, which we call cathedrals and churches, that it's only for the rich people. No, some rich people certainly contributed to it, but I can tell you that most of the churches that I have seen were paid by the nickels of poor people and by the sweat of the brow of people who actually built those churches and didn't actually see it in its completion and fruition, because they had faith knowing that their job, even if they were poor, was to build up the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God, does have people with great financial wealth and also people who don't. But in God's eyes, they're all his beloved children. I can tell you this because I know a lot of very wealthy people who grew up not knowing they were rich and don't act it, because they knew that the most important thing they had in their life wasn't how much they had in the bank account, but how much faith they actually had. And I know a lot of poor people who grew up not knowing they were poor because their parents raised them with Christian dignity. So let's make sure that we understand that when we talk about poverty in the Christian context, it's not about how much you have, but it's about who you know you are. You are inheritors of the kingdom of heaven. And that's my commentary when it comes to faith and poverty. And now, let's talk about culture, because here is where the poverty really kicks in. I can say that I am Filipino. I grew up most of my life in America. I was trained by Jesuits and lived in Italy for many years. And because I travel so much, I consider myself, in a sense, a citizen of the world. And even though I'm Filipino, I had a lot of German teachers, which is why I'm always on time. All right. No, it kind of gives me, how I would say, the best of East and West. I wish I would represent the best of East and West, but regardless, I have a blending of it. And when it comes to understanding poverty in a cultural sense, I have seen poor. I've seen poor in my own country, the Philippines, in America, because remember, I actually serve the poor in the Baltimore area. We try to always have food to give to people as we're finishing our service. And during the months of December, January, and February, we devote the majority of our services, resources, time, and staff to serving the poor. So I get it. I've also been to a lot of other developing nations with very high GDPs, but I also see poor there too. I've worked with Mother Teresa, even in the missionary areas of Calcutta. So I've seen a lot of poor. But Mother Teresa said it very well, that America was one of the most poor countries she's ever seen because of the lack of faith. And they were so poor that they felt it was necessary to kill children who were not born, because so many people didn't want to pay for food another mouth to feed. You can see that poverty comes in many horrible shapes and sizes. But in this sense of poverty has also created an extreme poverty of critical thinking. It's made people dumb because it's created a sense of entitlement. I can say this, that from what I've seen in poor countries, in the Philippines, for example, poverty is not as much of a systemic problem. It's more of a reality that that they just don't have the infrastructure. They haven't had people really try to invest in them. It's not because they're lazy, it's because of clearly a lack of opportunity. But I can compare the two, America and the Philippines. In the Philippines, the poverty is really just a lack of opportunities. In America, it really is systemic. Not against race, so don't think that I'm going there, because we all know that some of the poorest people in America are white people who live in the Appalachians. They're very, very poor. So it's not a systemic race thing, and whenever anyone tries to bring that up, you just have to pray for them because they are really ignorant. They do very little reading and zero critical thinking. The systemic problem is sin, because it's the sin that comes from their own personal sin, either making incredibly bad choices with drugs, with alcohol, with addictions, of just wanting to live this kind of life because they can't, quote unquote, fit into the rest of society. Or it's a systemic problem based on people who have the power to do good, but they do nothing about it. You know, it's really funny because San Francisco, named after a saint, for God's sakes, who cared for the poor. What do their political leaders do? Nothing to help the homeless. Nothing. So check out this video that talks a little bit about the cultural systemic problem of homelessness in America.
I've been homeless for 20 years. There's a lot of incentive to not actually get off the streets, which we see a lot in San Francisco. And that goes back to the fact that a lot of nonprofits encourage homelessness. If I was homeless today in San Francisco, someone will make more money with me being homeless than if I was actually not homeless. When you're being paid to solve a problem, you have a financial incentive to make problems worse. And a lot of the homelessness nonprofits we have in San Francisco, they are given all this money, but they're not actually given an audit of how they actually spend the money.
Because they can get away with it. The root causes of homelessness. They're not addressing that. The nonprofit is going to do what the nonprofit's told to do or what they're paid to do. It's not the nonprofit, it's the elected person that employs them.
We cover homelessness in San Francisco because we do care about the city and the residents that are dealing with it in their streets.
You can see how homelessness, poverty, it isn't a lack of opportunity. It's the multiplication of sin that has actually bled into the systems of government. America's homelessness and their poverty, again, is really rooted in the fact that leaders, people who are considered public servants, are actually very self-serving. I can see that time and time again, especially with good nonprofit groups that work so hard to try to help people in need. And they are given either very little money from the government, or if the government controls them, they just go ahead and do their bidding. I know for a fact that there are some groups that are paid by the government to keep people poor, handing out needles and providing even what I would call just these poor incentives from food stamps. And people are going to be like, you mean to tell me you shouldn't give food to the poor? No, you should make healthy food accessible, knowing that, culturally speaking, people use food stamps to buy cigarettes and terrible sugar-laced food, fatty foods, things that are going to make you addicted to unhealthiness. You can see that in America, poverty is no longer seen as skinny people or children with bloated bellies because their stomachs are filled with microbes and worms. No. In America, poverty is seen in obesity. Poverty is seen in people who have no real dignity. They almost treat themselves as if they are victims. In a way, they are, by people who have abused them. And so one of the things that I would love to see the world learn how to do is to do what Mother Teresa did. She worked with the poor and she improved the culture. She improved the area by giving them the dignity of work. It is possible. I'm trying to do that in a very small and limited way, but at least I'm trying to just provide some sort of job so that people can have the dignity of work. Because if there is at least a sense of dignity, people can at least know that they are a part of society, that they're not useless, that they actually have meaning. And so whenever I look at the culture in poverty, it breaks my heart knowing that it doesn't have to be this way. We just need to hire the right people. And when I say hire the right people, I mean elect the right people. And I know a lot of people say, you know, Father Leo, you talk a lot about politics as a Catholic priest, because technically poverty isn't only a political conversation. It's also a religious one. And it's so interesting that a lot of people say, you know, if you say any more about politics, then you shouldn't receive tax exemption. Okay, fine. I'll pay taxes as long as I know that the taxes are actually going to do good things. You know, it's so interesting that America wants to solve the world's problems, but they can't seem to solve their own. They want to give billions of dollars to corrupt dictators to fight basically a war that there is no real path to an end, and nor has there been any accounting of where the money is gone, although we do know that President Losinski's family have bought mansions and yachts, and yet America doesn't seem to know how to take care of its own, including the veterans who are homeless, including people who are on the streets because they've been evicted from their homes, because they can't pay rent, because inflation is so high. You can see how it's frustrating when people don't think that the Catholic Church should have a voice to call out political leaders for the corruption. Because guess what? That's what we're supposed to do. Call out sin on all levels. Yes, including even in our own house. And so I always want to remind my brother priests of what St. Peter said to St. Paul. Go and do what you need to do, preach the gospel, but make sure you take care of the poor. So when the Catholic Church doesn't take care of the poor, then we've got problems. I'm grateful to know that most of the Catholic churches that I'm aware of have good programs that assist in serving the poor. Can they do better? Yes. And I'm hoping that in 2024, we will take greater efforts to assist the poor. Even if it means, you know, us ministers taking more of a pay cut. And people are going to be like, including you, Father Leo, please know, I already take a pay cut because I actually don't get money from any one group. Again, I don't have a church that pays me. I don't have a religious community that takes care of me. If I don't work, I don't eat. I'm a different kind of priest altogether. And that's one reason why I make sure that my accounting is that whenever monies come to me, I make sure that it goes to serving the poor, which we're going to hear about in my next section on commentaries on poverty, my personal opinions. But let's just conclude with this when it comes to dealing with the culture of the poor. Let's make sure that we try to look at the actual culture. When in the Philippines, helping them is going to be different than if you are in Germany, Italy, or America, South America, or in Canada. Every culture has a unique way of approaching and serving the poor. But I can tell you this. It begins when you're going to look at them in the eyes and treat them with respect. You know, I always try to have, okay, now I don't always try. I try to have. I don't always do a good job with it. I'm just confessing now. But I try to have a bag of goodies in my car so that when I'm at the streets at a stoplight, people want to ask for help. I don't give them money, but I do try to give them a little something, you know, toiletry kit or a snack, bottle of water, whatever I can give, but not necessarily money because I know what they're going to do with it. And if I don't have anything to give to them, sometimes I have given them some change just because I just felt the need to do it. But I do try to look at them in the eye and just simply say, God bless you. So let's try this, culturally speaking. Find someone who's in need, look at them in the eye, treat them with the respect they deserve. And so now let's get into my personal commentary and what I think needs to happen when dealing with the poor. And I want to start off with this video from someone who thinks, golly, I just want you to hear the level of entitlement that this person the vibe that you get from a young woman like this.
You're okay going to sleep at night?
Yes.
Knowing that you have evicted a family and put them out at risk of homelessness onto the street? You're
Yes.
okay with that?
Yes.
I think there should be empathy for people struggling.
All right, I'll serve a very empathetic eviction notice.
I think homelessness shouldn't exist. I think people should not be homeless.
Sure, and people shouldn't be sick either, and isn't it a shame that people... That's the
Those are
world.
that is not comparable in
It
any
is.
way.
It is.
Absolutely not.
It's the world we live in.
Yeah, of course people, that's just life. But homelessness is not life. Homelessness is a societal problem. Homelessness is something that we created.
But the thing is, everything you're saying boils down to, I want the government to help me, the government should solve the problems. That's not the real world.
Do you have the answers to everything in the world?
No, but I have the answer to this. It's called a free market. What irritates me is when tenants tell me they can't pay rent because their mum just died. They would never call their energy provider and say, I can't pay my energy bill because my mum died. They would never call Sainsbury's and go in and say, my mum died, can I have free food? Why do they come to me? They prey and leech and use emotional manipulation on struggling landlords with stories of why they can't pay the rent, and it's wrong.
So you're telling me that tenants are the ones who are preying and leeching on
Correct.
landlords?
All right. Ooh. First of all, this directly relates to my commentary simply because I see two opposing attitudes. My commentary on poverty is an attitudinal one. This young man is a landlord, clearly, and he is going to evict somebody, and he seems to have no problem about it. I'm sure that he might feel bad for the people because of the situation in which they find themselves, and that's normal, but he also has to provide for him and his own family. What annoyed me the most was the opposing attitude of entitlement that this young woman, and boy, I don't know her, she might be a nice person, but she just sounds absolutely annoying. She sounds like a complainer, and she sounds like someone who wants to bring up problems, but has no real good solutions. Her solution was simply let the government take care of everything because houses are a right. Okay? She might think that, but houses are not rights. Treating people with dignity and respect, that is a right. But a home is not a right because then you build into the problem of how many rooms makes a home. How much space, how many amenities do you need in order to say that housing is a right? Her generation, and gosh, just even, I beg your pardon, but her just incredibly whiny voice is this level of entitlement. She has, albeit questions, but she has no problem bringing up the problems, but then she has no solutions. She just wants to argue and claim to be empathetic. It reminds me of the one video of this guy coming up with a microphone and saying to people, we have a lot of these migrants coming across, we should provide homes for them. Do you agree? And everyone who's very woke will say, yes, we should definitely provide homes for them. And then he'll bring up like a person who looks like an an immigrant and say, well, we've got this immigrant, can he stay in your house? And they're like, oh, no, 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 no. You see, everyone loves to talk the talk, but they don't want to walk the walk. And that's certainly a temptation even for me. I'm talking about poverty. Spent many minutes talking about it. So now you're going to ask yourself, so what are you going to do about it? Well, in America, again, I'm trying to do something with the local needs and to do it in a way that they will understand. The food culture, being able to build up, someone's dignity by learning how to cook, but more importantly, learning how to serve. And hopefully I'm doing something for people who might have, come from disadvantaged communities or would, not have an opportunity like this. So I'm trying to do that in America. That's what the whole Table Foundation is all about. But now, seeing what I've seen in the Philippines, I mean, literally going into places that kind of look like garbage dumps, and yet seeing people that are, dressed not well, but they're dressed with at least dignity. It's very moving for me. I even went to the prison, and it's just one big cell block. They don't have individual cells, and there might have been 60 people, and I don't know, maybe 100 square foot cell structure. And I had some of the youth group come and sing songs for them, and I had communion service for them. Anyway, I can't let something like this not affect me. It's been many years since I've been to the Philippines, and when I went, I came as a very new priest, and I didn't really have much to show for it. But after 25 years, I'll celebrate my priesthood June 5th, 1999. So in 2024, I'll celebrate 25 years. I want to do something. So for the first time, and without my team really knowing about this, surprise, more work for you all. I'm going to start a foundation, another one, and it's going to be called the Centennial Cross Foundation. And I'll explain that in some social media posts. My dad basically built a big cross on top of a hill, and then he also created stations of the cross that lead up to it. It's a pretty simple structure now. I want to actually bring a lot of improvement to it. But I want to call it the Centennial Cross Foundation. And its objective is to support the Catholic faith and the culture of Katangan Masbate, the place where I was born. I want to be able to use some of the money to assist the poor and to build up communities. You'll see that we've done some of that by just distributing hundreds of care packages during the holidays. I also want to invite you as people who might be interested in an experience of mission work, but also a cultural pilgrimage, to be able to arrange groups of people to come with me to places like this and to do some really good work, whether it be building up wells or helping to clean up areas. And I don't know, to kind of bring some of the beautiful goodness that we have in America to the Philippines. And besides which, you're all going to have amazing food. Okay. So on top of all this, I want, some of the monies to assist in the spiritual formation of the youth. And why? Because as much as I love what the youth are experiencing here, they have great temptations to become quote unquote westernized or secularized. Being westernized, I have no problem with. But when the Western world is kind of equated with secularism, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with the fact that a lot of young people I saw had phones in their hands and they were just sitting there scrolling when they could have been cleaning up. I want to be able to make sure I tell people that here in the Philippines, and to use the good examples of maybe some of our missionaries who might come from America to do some of this good work. Basically, I just want to try to do something good. And obviously, I can use your help. But this is at least a start to something hopefully good. So, as I'm kind of bringing this all to a close, I'm just trying to do what I can, because again, what I experienced here definitely moved my heart, and hopefully in a direction for me to do what Jesus did and what St. Peter instructed St. Paul to do, to spread the word of God and to make sure that we always remember the poor. I want to thank you for being a part of this show. And again, I want to thank everyone who supported us in 2023 in our Patreon community, as well as those who are going to support us in 2024. And the reason why I want to ask for your help with this Patreon community is because a portion of those proceeds are going to go to support this newly founded Centennial Cross Foundation, which I still have to talk to my lawyers to put the paperwork together to make it a true legitimate thing. But it's going to be, I don't know, a new year for me, for all of you, and for me in the year 2024, which I know is going to be a crazy year. I want at least to be a good start to a year where my focus is not on the fear of the craziness of a world that's being distracted by politics and stupidity, but to focus on the cross and to focus on what Jesus asks us to do. Build up his kingdom on earth, including the rich people, including the people who are not so rich, but hopefully filled with the Spirit. I want to conclude by kind of playing a video that I took of young people singing to the prisoners. Thank you for being a part of this. Please share this with family and friends. Ask them to subscribe and to please support us on Patreon. And most importantly, God bless you and stay hungry for God.
And the soul felt his word, a tree of gold. The weary world rejoices for yonder grace, and new and glorious morn. Christ was born. Oh, now